So David, you usually type your name out, so that's why I say David C. Weldon
Yeah.
Jr. Um, cinematographer, director of photography,
Hmm.
whatever people like to
Yeah.
refer to you as, whatever you want to be referred to as. Um, do you want to like throw out your website or anything like that, social media before we start, or
Sure. Yeah.
kind of
So,
let people, if they catch this, they can kind of
yeah,
do a little creeping?
yeah. You can creep and follow me on Instagram is probably the best. Is or I don't like I use Twitter, but I'm not on Twitter. Just David C. Weldon Jr. Jr. All one word. Same with the website davidcweldonjr.com. It was just the easiest way to kind of brand myself, so that I differentiated myself from a doctor in Florida who happens to
Ah,
have the same name as my father and I. So that's why I did it that way
awesome.
a couple years ago. So yeah.
Yeah, that was my. I didn't have any trouble with my name except for two things. Was a website. I was just gonna get alexpotter.com
Hmm.
because I'm a chauvinist, I guess. I don't know. I had no use for it, or egotistical. I don't know. Yeah, I was just gonna get it because it's like, well, I may as well get my name, right? I don't have a
Right.
middle
Right.
name. It's just that's it. I was gonna get it, and I forget where the guy is, Maine or something.
Oh.
Did you not? It's just some dude in Maine, and he's got alexpotter.com. And what's he doing with the website? Literally, the website is one page, and he's selling a boat. I said, you have that goddamn domain, and I forget how you do it, but you look up who's hosting it, and then you end up finding
Yeah.
an email of like who's
Hmm.
kind of owning it. Email the guy, never got a response, and
That's
he
because
just says,
he probably died on.
1987. Yeah, he's probably dead somewhere.
He's probably dead
It's
on that
just,
boat.
but it's still charging his credit card every year magically. How, and it just says, you know, alexpotter.com, 1987, Bass Classic, whatever the thing is. Like, come on.
That's too funny.
That and then like IMDb, the other Alex Potter that just was Alex Potter is like some
Hmm.
actor with like one credit or something.
Uh,
Um, I'm not an actor, so that's good that at least there wasn't that. It was like there's a
hmm.
differentiation in the credits as far
Right.
as.
Makes it a little
But
easier.
anyway, so yeah, having you on, I want to have you on to kind of talk about where you got started and
Hmm.
kind of touch on some of the milestones and when you got started doing what you want to do or doing things in the category you want to do up until today, where you are now, and then maybe kind of where you're looking to go in the future. You
Sure.
want to talk about like let's talk about like education. We can kind of start in that world. Like, did you try for the 4 year traditional, or were you thinking I'm just going to go strictly to a film school just for the filmmaking and the context? Like, what was your?
These are all yes and no answers you're looking for, right? Just that's all you want.
Well, I want to
No,
know. I kind of want to know like where your
okay.
trail, where you,
Right.
where do people branch off? Where do they say I'm not going to
Right.
be an accountant? I'm going to do this, and if I do this,
Mhm.
I end up down this road of trying to connect to this guy and moving out of state and what
Mhm.
people do.
I think filmmaking for me and eventually becoming a director of photography didn't begin until post college, because I knew it when I was about maybe 12, 13, that I wanted to become a sportscaster.
Mm,
And
interesting.
because I wanted to be a professional athlete as a kid. I wanted to play in the NBA. That was my dream.
Really?
Like legit. Like
Yeah.
thought I was going to be good enough.
Okay.
Um, and it really came down to just not like I had the skills. I grew up in Washington D.C. area. I played AAU basketball, which is a big thing as far as kids that are learning
What's AU?
to
Which
a,
college is?
it's AAU, which is it's like a under 18 league
Right.
where like there's different factions of it, of like when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Sure.
And when you grow up on the East Coast and you play basketball, that's like a really big thing to be a part of. And I wasn't like a starter or some kid like, playing like LeBron in high school or anything like that. And then when I went to a school called DeMatha Catholic High School, which for anybody listening, DeMatha is a very well-known sports program, high school, as well as very well known for their academics.
Sure.
It's based in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is not too far from where I grew up. And when I got to school, that's when the dynamic shifted from like well, maybe instead of playing a sport, I'll be, involved in television, because I couldn't cut it. I had the skills, but I didn't have the endurance, the training. And like, it became very clear to me that that's why I was a bench player in AAU. Like I could only last. Like I didn't train like these kids were training, cause they were training to, I'm going to play college, or I'm going to get a scholarship, that kind of thing. And it was just, everybody grows up different. My parents had no background in that world. They didn't go to college. And so like most of the kids that I was competing against, like their fathers and mothers had been former college athletes. So they knew what it took, so they understood
it was in their like life, in their blood, in their heritage or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I got to high school, I wanted to be around all of it. I wanted to be around sports, and I started thinking about it. And then my senior year, they announced they were going to do a sports broadcasting class, which I didn't get to take because I was taking music at the time. I played concert music when I was throughout school, and I wasn't that great of a student. And so like doing band, as difficult as it was kind of an automatic A. As long as
participation credit.
It was a regular class. It was participation based in a lot of ways, but I was still, and if I had more interest in it, I probably could have gone on to play music professionally, but I just didn't care. And
that's the core, right? No matter what you do, you got to have enough umph where you're like, okay, I'm gonna keep going through the pitfalls.
Right. And I had talent. My teachers hated me for it because they were like, they were like, you just don't apply yourself. I'm like, cause I don't care. I'm like, I'm not interested in this anymore. No, like, cause I growing up, from fourth grade on, I played the saxophone. And then when I got to high school, I switched instruments and I started playing the bassoon, which if you look up the bassoon, like you're going to be like, what? Like that, really? That's crazy. It's insane. And I'm like 14, 15 playing, a major crazy instrument. And not that that's harder or not as hard as another instrument. Every instrument is difficult to master. Not that I was a master of it, not at all. But I clearly showed some promise in school.
So you went through these stages of realizing what you didn't want to do,
Yeah, I think so. Even as a teenager, I was always fascinated without really realizing it. Like I used to watch sports and I would get really into like why they would make their choices to cut to a camera angle at a certain time. Like
and how old were you when you were having these realizations?
Like 14, 15, 16. Okay. Like teenager, and just like where you hear, a lot of people usually tell the story when they're involved in film of like, oh, I remember being 9 and I was watching E.T. for the first time. And then that's where I got into filmmaking. It was like, well, I got into filmmaking in a different way, like sport, like, cause when I then eventually became a professional in the sports industry, and I did that for 10 years before becoming a DP, like that carryover of being a teenager and being interested in trying to understand like when to make the cut, like when you're going to cut from your wide game cam that's following the action to the close up, like, and try to get in and out of it. So you think about the audience doesn't miss anything, but also tells the story, like that, like from the age of 14 to 24, 25, I was still thinking that way, but I was actually being able to do it professionally. So, when I was a senior, that's when I really started talking to my parents and talking to our guidance counselor at school about wanting to be involved in television and shooting and stuff like that, and sports specifically. So we started looking at schools in the Maryland area. We looked we went as far as Ohio, and we looked at the time I was somewhat, I remember my father, I think it was my father, had kind of said something to the effect of like, well, what if you get involved? Because we were looking at Syracuse, I think, for a brief moment. I probably wouldn't have got in, but because Syracuse has a very strong broadcasting program, like a lot of ESPN, like Mike Tirico and all these other big sports broadcasters have come from Syracuse. So it was a great program. And it was like, well, what if you get there and you do it and you don't like it, but you still want to be involved in it? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, what if you want to get behind the camera? And he's like, well, maybe we should go somewhere that has a little bit of everything. I was like, okay.
Is your dad speaking?
So my dad speaking to me, yeah. And the school I was dead set on going to was Kent State University in Ohio. Kent State's more famously known for the school shooting in the 60s, unfortunately.
Sure.
But they have a very strong journalism program even today. And so we went and visited the school. We saw everything set up, and it was somewhat mind-blowing to see a school that looked like it hadn't stepped out of the 80s, because obviously, every university has periods of time where they get large donations or chunks of money or whatever it may be, especially for private universities where things are built up really great, but then they just kind of get locked in that time capsule. And I'll never forget walking through
Even
with
I didn't go to university, but I went to, every, what do you call it? Community college
Mhm.
that had any film or art.
Yeah.
And they all had that. They all had
Yeah.
everything in that stage with the edit bay and all that stuff
Mhm.
was all exactly 10 years old.
Right.
And when it gets refreshed, it'll all then be current for
Exactly.
10 years.
Yeah, they get paused later on. Yeah. So it was like, it's funny because I still have that image in my head when like thinking back to it now. And I remember walking around the whole, not necessarily the whole campus, but that particular part of the campus with the head of the journalism department. And so he started talking about the process of like, what it was going to be like in order for you to get involved. And he was like, essentially until your junior year, you're not doing anything. You're just studying, you're doing classes, and you're taking courses that are related to what you want to do. It's not like you're just sitting in some random math class that has no application to what you're trying to build your degree in. But I got a little nervous because you had to maintain like a 3.0 GPA, and my mother was like, he can do it. My dad was like, yeah, right. Like the kid doesn't try, and I was like, yeah, that made me a little uncomfortable. But I remember on the ride home kind of going like, I don't know, like it's not what I expected it to be. And so fast forward maybe a few weeks or so, we visited a couple schools in Maryland, but the Maryland schools didn't really promote that like there really was any sort of program. We found out later there was, to a couple schools we looked at. But I ended up going to Robert Morris University outside of Pittsburgh, out by the airport. And what really got me into going there was the day that I went to the school to shadow the school and kind of like go see what the program was all about. It's funny because in hindsight, it was kind of, in some ways, it was probably a bad thing. But at that moment, I was like, this is great. I showed up during it was the Tuesday or Wednesday, like student news broadcast. And the director at the time was a guy named Brian Turpak. And Brian eventually became a very close friend of mine when I attended the school, and we were roommates for a number of years, even after college and stuff. And we still stay in touch. Brian turns to me and he's like, hey, welcome, visit the school, blah, blah. And like, he's like 10 minutes away from like, he has to do like his live broadcast with a bunch of students. He goes, would you want like an opportunity to like really see what this is all about? And I was like, okay. Yeah. He's like, I need you to run the graphics machine for me. Basically what it was, they didn't
bounced out 10 minutes.
Yeah. They didn't have somebody to do it. And so he was going to have to like do like 3 or 4 things. And it was basically like, click this button whenever I tell you to click it. I was like, okay.
Right.
And it was so stupid, so simple. And
but you were probably hyped. You were like, "Fuck yeah,
yeah!" Like,
coach, yeah.
Like it honestly kind of gave me this thought of like, here I am visiting the school, and they're so open and so willing to like get involved. And I was like,
meant to be.
Yeah, it was meant to be. I was supposed to go there, and so I decided to go there, and it really was the right move in so many ways. But the weird part about it was like everything I did in our student media center, as it was called, there were really no courses related to it. It was all extracurricular. So I have a corporate communications degree.
Okay.
And I spent more time doing that, like studying, like by being in there. Like I produced my own debate sports show, like a very reminiscent of ESPN's Pardon the Interruption. I worked on and I co-produced my senior year. We had our own Colonial Sports Center, just like ESPN. I was the first student at the school. We live to tape. We did live broadcasts of our NCAA, we had NCAA football, basketball, and other sports, and we had also had hockey, all Division One. So we always did football and basketball. Well, I wanted to do hockey, and so long story short, I got the school to allow me to do it. And my friend and she and I were the first students to produce it, any sort of like completely on our own without anybody involved from the university, more or less. And
But with the university's backing as far as equipment
Yeah.
and personnel.
Personnel, we actually got the equipment from an alumni that was running the community access station in the city called Moon. It was Moon Township was the name of the city, or township, I guess. And we worked with him, and now they have like a really strong relationship. And he has like this huge trailer that's got like the school's logos on it, and
Wow.
it's a whole big partnership that kind of started because of us. Because we were originally, I wanted to do a coach's show with the hockey coach. That was like I had done my debate show. I'd won an award, like the Telly Award kind of thing, like a student one. And I was like, oh, I want to do a different show, and then that'll give me something to kind of show people, like when I graduate, like that I know how to do stuff. And
Portfolio-related
yeah, a little
kind of
portfolio thing. And for whatever reason, the school didn't want me to do this coach's show. And then they were like, well, we heard you want to do the live hockey broadcast. Like, why don't you do that? And it was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I did that. And it actually did help because we had I don't know, the gentleman's name is Joe Hale. Joe was the television engineer. He wasn't really a professor. I think he is now. At the time he wasn't, but Joe is very much influential and instrumental in my education as well as my professional career. If it wasn't for Joe, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And
what
Joe,
what did he do?
he oversaw essentially all the student broadcasts and helped us all from a technical aspect of, because we had like a full on, the master control and tape decks and all the crazy stuff. And but he had come from working for the Pittsburgh Penguins for their in-house media department. And so he became like the direct funnel for a lot of people, and myself included, whether
He was
it was
an employee of the school.
Yeah, he was an employee of the
Okay,
school,
okay.
and he still was, he was still a part of the union, the local broadcast union. So he
We
knew
had that
everybody.
connection.
Yeah, so he would,
Yeah.
he would hear, hey, there's, people are looking for interns, and then people started to understand, like, oh, I can call Joe if I need an intern. And so my senior year, he came to me, and it was kind of like that, that Godfather moment of like, you've earned it, kid, And so he was like, hey, do you want to do an internship with the Penguins? And I was like, yeah. And so that directly after, it led to a part-time job with the Penguins after doing the internship, and then eventually led to a full-time job. Because while I was part-time with them, fortunately the team won the Stanley Cup in 2009, and that obviously led to more money. We started the in-house media team was doing like their own. We were doing TV shows for the local Fox Sports affiliate. Like we were shooting them, editing them, putting them out, just handing a disc over, and it was broadcasting TV. And I got hired to associate produce 3 of the shows right away. And I basically got, they were, I'm still friends with many of them today, but it was like, I got their attention because of my background in hockey, which my background in hockey began in college. I knew nothing about hockey before I got to Pittsburgh. And that eventually, I became a lead producer at the Penguins and produced their flagship show for 2 seasons before they decided to cancel the show. They essentially found a way to do it cheaper, and I subsequently I lost my job and I got laid off, and I went full freelance, and that was 2011 or 12, I think, is at least 8 years ago. And from that moment, I never
Was
looked
that
back.
kind of a catalyst of trying to take it to the next level?
Yeah, I think it really was. I think, I'm, and you and I know each other pretty well, and I think you could probably attest to that. I think I'm a little gun shy when it comes to making decisions, no matter really what it is. Like, not well in a like if I'm on set, no problem. Like I can, but with big decisions like big purchases or life moves, things like that. Maybe you don't know that.
Off taking your time with things like that, anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, I was definitely, 20. This is 10 years ago now. I was 24 when I lost the job, so maybe it was 2010 actually. And I was like if I hadn't lost the job, I probably would have stayed there for at least 4 or 5 more years. And I was miserable. I hated it. I hated it because it had
The job you
become,
lost?
yeah, because it had become so repetitive. It was extremely redundant, same thing over and over again. And I felt undervalued. You know,
Sure.
my boss at the time, the first boss that hired me was great. He's still a great friend today. He ended up like moving departments. They brought in a new guy, good guy. And and I don't necessarily fault him because his job was to bean count. It was make sure that our value is there. So it was very much an office space kind of situation where it was like, are you really, you know, or like, are you wearing enough pieces of flair? And you're like,
Oh, God.
dude, I'm like sleeping here, man. And it's like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I want to make sure you're committed. You know, like there was stuff like that. And it was like,
They have these little margins and things, and they just want to. They
yeah,
very little to do, so they start looking at other people.
right,
Are you doing your job? Because
right.
I don't
Right.
have anything to do. So
And that
check on
was-
your ass.
And that was kind of his job. His job was to do that. And that's why, like, as much as I want to be like, you know, I can't stand him. I'm like, that's why he was hired. It's like, well, I can't be
Right.
mad at him. I'm more or less, I'm not happy with the organization and how that handled. But they treated me really well on the way out. You know, they made sure I was covered with a severance package. You know, they took care of me. I had some hiccups with health insurance and subsequently had like major shoulder surgery right after I got let go. And I had a problem with the hospital and I called them and was like, what happened? And they took care of it all. And they were like, no, the paperwork just wasn't filed properly. We got you. Like they didn't turn their back on me, which was like
This is
to
the
this,
Penguins.
the Penguins. Yeah. Like I can't speak highly enough of that organization. And obviously every organization makes decisions that you don't necessarily agree with in the time. But at the end of the day, there were still a lot of people that cared about me there. And I still, I freelanced for them up until the moment I moved to California. And
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your move. That's the next big thing after that.
yeah. So the move to California kind of came in 2 parts. The first part was, I'd probably been about 6 to 8 months after getting let go. I was starting
really tired of your job at 7-Eleven.
yeah. Fortunately, I never had
I
to
want to
do
be a cinematographer, and these fucking Snicker bars can just suck it.
Well, no, I didn't even, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know what a DP or a cinematographer was at that time. I had no clue.
Well, so you're working at the Penguins, and your life is sports related, and everything you're thinking about on the day to day.
Yeah. So I was
is sports related.
trying to get involved.
This flips, and you think movies or TV.
Yeah.
Or
And it definitely started to flip to think movies and like commercials. I think that's what really got my attention.
What was the catalyst? I mean, where was the
Um,
turning point?
I think the turning point really became when I came here. I got an internship with Shane Hurlbut, the cinematographer.
But I mean, when you're in Pennsylvania,
oh, when that
a
happened,
magazine one day, and you're like, okay, here's the thing. You're looking at a picture. I mean, what's the
catalyst kind of became, I had started reading all these different blogs. Yeah, I was reading Shane Hurlbut's blog. I was reading Vincent LaFerray's. And I think what the catalyst probably was, I started to catch on to the idea that people were using the Canon 5D Mark II DSLR to shoot with. And I started looking at the price point, and I was like, wait a second. And I kept hearing rumblings in Pittsburgh.
That was a revolution. No pun intended, but
it was.
That was a very big turning point for independent filmmakers.
It was.
People for the budget to come. For the budget to come plummeting down.
Right.
And for a lot of people who didn't have access to put it boldly, to shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
Cinema look to then go buy a 5D
And I think before that, I was shooting a lot on Sony XD Cam, the big broadcast cameras, which were at the time the full package was $80,000, and that
is still on tape.
This is still it's on disc. It was XD Cam disc or whatever it was, and
that's insane.
It was insane, and it only shot 1080. It was $80,000, and that was with a lens too, I guess. But I remember when I was at the Penguins. It was the summer before I got let go. I think this is probably where I could put the catalyst of where it all changed. So I remember because the summer times for a hockey team is kind of boring. There's nothing to do because the team's not playing. And so
Winter at the beach is just not
Yeah,
all that
exactly.
interesting.
It is. Yeah, it's just kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So I remember I was trying to just like, well, I want to just get better and more creative, and they were constantly kind of leaning on us to like come up with new stuff, come up with new ways to make our content exciting. And I was like, okay. So I started to think like, well, I'd come across this UK DP called Alistair Chapman, and Alistair
Yeah.
still around, and he was a big Sony guy, did a lot of stuff with XD Cam, and I was like, well, maybe I can just learn more about the cameras. And so there was one day he started talking about shooting with the XD Cam, the same camera body that we had, the same model and the same lens, and using the 2x zoom extender lens on the lens. It's like a broadcast lens, not a film lens or a still camera lens, and backing the camera physically up using the 2x extender, and then creating depth of field. And I granted,
Wait, was this? Hold on. Was this that phase where before the DSLR,
mm-mm.
when everyone was putting those like that mirror box thing between the camera's lens and another lens?
This was at the
And
same.
cameras were like 9 feet long.
This was at the same time, but this wasn't that. But I know what you're talking. That was
Remember
the depth.
That was like what
It was-
year or two.
Yeah, it was called the depth of field adapter, and it was a company
Fuck,
called
I
Lettuce.
remember people
Lettuce
going
made it.
all in on that thing.
Yeah, because it
They
was
had
you.
2 lenses and the body and the
Yep, you would attach the camera, this adapter, this like weird little L thing, and then a still lens on the end of it, and it created. It basically allowed you could use a video camera and create depth of field with it.
Right.
So everything was really soft and blurry in the background. So I remember him talking about doing this with a broadcast camera because it was an a different way of doing it instead of doing it that way with the
Sure.
field adapter.
Oh, so going for that effect, but not that method.
Exactly, without spending more money. And I was like, so we had to do in the summer, we were getting ready to unveil I think the new arena hadn't necessarily opened yet, because the team had just moved to a brand new building across the street from the building that existed. And we had to film a bunch of stuff about the new food that was going to be offered. So we had an in-house television host
to
to fans like that they could
fans,
buy.
okay,
Yeah, concessions and stuff. So
yeah.
I remember telling the guys like our other, like one of our other producers, like, hey,
What
let's
was the Penguins, Dodger, like
Dodger
what was
dog.
the Penguins Dodger dog. What did they shoot out? What was their like thing they?
I think it was probably beer.
Yeah.
No, they didn't
Just-
shoot anything out.
just-
I don't
They
really
didn't
know.
have they didn't have like penguin popsicle or something.
I think the Permane Brothers sandwich is probably, that's more of a Pittsburgh thing versus like
Yeah.
affiliated with the team, but that was the famous
okay.
sandwich.
Sure.
That it was. If you're ever in Pittsburgh, go to Permane Brothers. It's worth it. Go to the one in the Strip District, the original one. That's a whole other story. Yeah.
Shout out to what?
Permane
Shout out to-
Brothers.
Pamanti Brothers. Primanti.
PRIMI something. I don't know.
Primanti. Okay.
But
The Primanti Brothers. All 9 of the people that watch this podcast.
yeah, give them
Think
free
about
sandwiches.
going, but not go because they're not.
Give them
there.
free sandwiches. Yeah. So we had to film all this stuff, like same things like that sandwich and other things. And so I talked to the producer that he's producing this one. And I
That's
was
more
just
like
like,
product shots though. At that point.
no, it was going to be our talent and a chef talking
Oh,
about
okay.
the food, and then some close-ups and cutaways and stuff. And I said, well, what if we shoot it like this? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I'm down. And I was like, okay. And it didn't quite do what we thought it was going to do, but it turned out fine. It wasn't bad or anything.
But you use this equipment that get you this shallow depth of field.
No, I did. No, this was. Remember, I said it was an alternative to that. This was just a
But
way
you
of.
use that alternative. This is you trying to apply this.
No, I
technology.
did. We didn't use the alternative. No, this was just using the
Just
existing
straight
stuff
up
we'd
XD
already
cam
had.
or something?
Yeah, this was straight up XD cam and just
Okay.
using the other end of the lens and just physically moving back is all it really
Oh,
was.
gotcha.
It was kind of stupid, but I remember that really got everything like moving forward. And it's just like I started really like getting into like, well, how do I make things look prettier and how do I make things look more interesting?
So through trying to do better at your job, that research led to you
Mhm.
expanding out and learning about techniques used by people in LA. And things like
Yeah,
that?
that's kind of where it started to come to, because so many of these different people that had gotten into the 5D had started blogging about it. And Philip Bloom, who was over in the UK, and Vincent LaFerre, the Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer, Shane Hurlbut. And so I found out about Shane through Vincent's blog, and then I'll never forget. I started following all of Shane's work. I had bought a 5D at this point. I was freelance at this point. This is months after that initial experiment with the XD cam. I had bought a 5D because it became apparent to me most of the city was shooting on red. There was a lot of, people were shooting red, and I was starting to work
2010.
It was like 2010, and I was doing a lot of work as a camera assistant for a couple different directors that were director DPs. I was really in Pittsburgh, and I was really like a shitty second AC. Like I just carried gear around, and I worked for a gentleman a lot named Glenn Prisborski. He's a big director, cinematographer out in Pittsburgh, and I talked to him.
Outside of LA has like 3 guys, right?
Yeah, basically
maybe not Pittsburgh. It's a little bit bigger, but everywhere
no,
outside of New York and LA,
Pittsburgh had like 3 Pittsburgh has
3
4
guys who've been doing this, and the only person getting in is that guy's son.
Yeah, basically Pittsburgh has.
If you're not his kid,
yeah, Pittsburgh has Glenn Prisborski, Jeff Garten, Rich Schutte, and
I remember all
Joe.
the names out there still. Wow.
Yeah,
and them all,
and another guy named Joe Grasso. And I remember Joe Grasso because he actually lives out here in LA, and I worked with his.
Sounds familiar.
It's funny because I worked with his. Now I worked with him like one time, like 10 years ago, but his key grip worked for me on one of my commercials at the end of last year, and we were talking about Pittsburgh, and he's like, Joe Grasso, and I was like, yeah, and I'm like, Joe doesn't know who I am, but I know who he is. I was like, it was kind of funny. And
his son, you said?
No, I worked with his key grip. His key grip.
Oh,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, it's another guy he works with, but yeah. So then and
you got the 5D, and you have these connections out there.
Yeah, I got the 5D, and it was really, what I saw was, okay, everybody's shooting on red, and I started to learn and talk to people about like rates, like the gear rates and stuff. And it became apparent to me, a lot of these jobs, if there was one, if they wanted 2 cameras, they weren't renting a second red, for a corporate video or a small commercial. It was like, go get a 5D because
you'll be the cutaway.
Yeah, you'll just be the cutaway or the quick insert or whatever. And it's like, we're not going to, and there's no,
what are they putting out to at the 2010? Are they putting out to 1080? Yeah,
it's just 1080. Okay. And but this time there's
1080 wasn't on the normal. Like not every household had a 1080 TV at this point. Am I thinking of the right year?
No, I think people probably did, or they at least
when was that HD mandatory thing?
Oh, for the antenna stuff, that had happened in like 2008. But nobody's really doing it. Yeah.
So
but
you were good to go with that.
That was good to go. Yeah. And like you figure at that time, the Canon C300 wasn't out yet. The C100, like the cameras that eventually replaced the 5D from a video standpoint from Canon didn't even exist yet.
Right.
And they just came, like the C300 came like a year later, but it was a big price difference. Like when that camera dropped, and the 5D was $3,000 and a C300 was 18,000. It was like, Jesus. Holy shit, and so I started to get a lot of work. I started to, work for different companies I worked for companies that were doing local commercials, and decent, budgets weren't huge, but it was like shoot on the 5D because it's cheap, and that's what they wanted to do. And
low profile on the street.
Yeah. And so that worked out. That definitely led to a lot of work. And then I was constantly like just trying to like learn as much as I could, just learn and learn and learn. I'm reading stuff all the time. And I was all over Shane Hurlbut's blog all the time. Yeah. And then and I followed him on social media and all that stuff. Well, one day, I'll never forget, I was sitting at the Toyota.
He came out there for something and you met him?
Well, that was later. That was 2 years later. That was 2 years later. So this is the first foray of how I got there, how I got to LA the first time. Gotcha. I was sitting at the Toyota dealership in Moon Township across the street from my university getting my oil changed. And I'm on Twitter and I see that Shane has just posted, I'm looking for 10 interns to come out. and I'm like,
bring them in, boys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like,
bring them in. I can see. All right, that's how we're going to do this. I can imagine. Give me on Twitter.
Yeah. And so I texted my buddy at the time and said, did you see that? Because we were both following it. We both were kind of going in a similar path.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I said to him, I said, you want to do this with me? And like, in my mind was like, I'm going to get this. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like,
What
I'll
do you
get
have
this
to
in.
lose?
Like, what do I have to lose? And he was like, no, I'm not. I can't move to LA. And I said, well, if we go together, I said we could probably
Oh,
find
it would
a small
require you to
part.
move to LA.
Yeah, it would require me to move to
I
LA.
got you.
And so, because I had like tweeted at him
Oh wait, is
and
this what I think it is? The 10 interns?
at Revolution and all that stuff.
Oh, just Revolution. Okay.
Yeah, it was Revolution and
Oh, gotcha.
with the rental house. And so I
Just to be clear, so that we're it's
Yeah,
not
for people.
dumbfounding anybody.
Yeah.
There used to be a camera rental house called Revolution Cinema Rentals that
Right.
Shane owned, and that's
Mhm.
where you went to do the internship.
Exactly. Yeah. So they basically was like because Shane has his company Hurlbut Visuals, which is now the Hurlbut Academy. It's an educational platform, and at this time he was doing a blog that was like occasionally doing some posts. He had some sponsors, but it wasn't necessarily enough for like, hey, come out and work 5 days a week for me. It was like, so he had this rental house, and the idea was like, well, come work at the rental house, and then I'll pop in from time to time, and we'll do stuff.
Yeah.
And I figured, because it was only supposed to last 3 months, and I figured, well, what do I have to lose? I was like, I'm not really
Oh, dude, yeah.
doing anything here in Pittsburgh, and I don't want to be in sports anymore. And I got to wait for 10 people to die in order for me to,
Yeah.
and I didn't know where to start either. I was like, because at this time I now knew what a DP was, and I was like,
Okay.
I want to be that, but I also didn't want to just be the 24, 25-year-old kid that was like, I'm a DP. I have a camera. Look at me.
Yeah.
I wanted to really learn, how do I become that professional that can do that big feature length film, that something like what Shane does.
So while still being in Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
at this point you had said to yourself, there's more out there.
Yeah.
As a camera operator
Mhm.
than your average industrial sports, whatever.
Exactly.
You can tell a story with a camera and so on, and these bigger aspirations.
Yeah, big time.
And so you're looking for these opportunities.
Mhm. And I think so.
You went to.
Well,
got on with the 10.
I got on with the 10 interns I went to the NAB show in Las Vegas,
Okay.
which is the big broadcasting show, and I just put myself in front of Shane to the point of where I made it known, like, I'm serious, and he was like, here's my card, send me an email. Let me know what you want to do.
I mean, how did you find him in NAB? Like, what did you do? Did you go searching around watching Twitter? Or?
No. So what I did was, at the time I was working for a production company, like day by day. I was helping them sell old gear on eBay. This company named Warhola
Classic.
Productions, owned by Jay Warhola. Jay's a wonderful man, and he was just, honestly, Jay was just trying to help me out. And Jay was, he knew what I was trying to do, and he was just trying to throw me something. And so he was
NAB for his company, or just
on my own, and he kind of put it in my head of like, well, hey, when you're doing all this eBay stuff, like, you should because I would talk to him about it, and because I was unsure of if this was a good idea, and he's like, you should just like look up to see if Shane's gonna go, and see, like, like NAB always has all those different speaking engagements. Like, maybe maybe you could go to one of those events and then just go up
tackle
to
him and just start beating on him.
Just beat on him. And I was like, wait, what? And so he really started to get the ideas in my head of taking this person who wasn't that confident and what to do, and say, like, he started just throwing me ideas. And that's exactly what I did. I went to NAB and walked, first event Monday morning he was doing a speaking engagement at Canon, and we saw like a bunch of people, and was like, oh, got nervous, waited for him to go to another booth. It got much smaller. Talked to him after that, and then Shane didn't quite. He was just kind of like, nice to meet you. Like, great. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. The interns. Yeah. Just, you should apply, and then see ya. And then I went to a booth that he was going to later, and the guys there helped me kind of like,
hey, it's
put
me
in
again.
front of him. Yeah.
I'm back.
Hey, it's me again. I'm back. And then that's when he was like, oh, okay, you're serious. All right. And I told him a little bit more about myself, and he was like, all right. And so I applied.
I'm really glad that social media existed for us in our age range.
Yeah.
Because it allowed us to figure out more about what's going on. And I don't know what the comparison would be, but, like reading a trade magazine or something, and you have no idea where or when these people are going to be anywhere. But
it's funny because
they're telling the world where they're going.
it was really my father that put it in my mind too, of like, of taking what Jay, at the guy that I was doing the eBay sales for his production company. My dad was the one that used to tell me stories about, my dad's been construction for 30 years. He used to find out where the foremans of the jobs would go drink. And my dad doesn't drink. And he would go to the bar, get a beer, and then just be like, "Oh, hey, you're Alex. You're
How
running that.
random is that?
How random is that? You're running the
Yeah.
job down the street, right? Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I just got done with I'm doing the hospital down the street. Yeah, yeah. You need a couple extra guys?" And my dad used to get work like crazy doing that. And so my dad kind of said that to me. It was
That's,
like,
that's the essence of freelance right there.
yeah, it's the essence of freelance. And my dad just kind of was like, "You should do the same thing." And I was like, "Huh?" Go and kind of be like, pretend like you're doing stuff even though you're not,
Yeah.
and I didn't really have
this
to.
This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say trailblazer and I use these words. Not that I don't respect the person who sort of follows that clear-cut path, but there's something to be said about somebody who, goes off the map and says,
Sure.
"I don't know how I'm going to get to this place that I want to get to, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to test these unproven methods that are complete maybes." And I think that persistence. I mean, if I ever had to say what's my am I really good at some skill? Do I have this amazing ability? Well, the thing that I'm good at is just persistence.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, but persistence to say, I want to be in this place. I want to work for this guy or whatever it is. And most of those people who are in the world that we work in, you don't really pop up on their radar unless you go see them again and go see them again. Or knock twice, 3-4 times, call 3-4 times. When you become persistent, you start to stand out of the crowd. And whether you're good or not, you're the guy that's there waiting when he comes to open the door. You're already sitting there. "Hey, how you doing? I'm here before you."
Right. Yeah.
And it's I just appreciate that, and that's why these stories are interesting.
It's funny though, because I think even with
yourself
I think even with that, like it's funny because like I know the sentiment you're expressing. It's like I don't even feel that way half the time. Like even today, like I look at it like it feels like it was all just luck, and I just got lucky versus it being hard work and thinking outside the box and all that kind of stuff.
But the person that goes to college for 4 years to be, a bean counter, a dentist, they do that, and then that internship, and then probably a job as an internship, and then eventually their own deal, and the same. But they don't see it any other way except that path. Just like you're saying, you see it as a path that you went down.
Well, but what I'm saying,
I have to highlight it and show you and talk to you about and express that, because it's a great thing, and it's a part of the human spirit. I think it can be equated to like the astronaut going to the moon. It's nowhere near that girth and that size, but it's that same thing of like, how can you make that happen? Well, somehow, some way.
But I think the thing I want to get to though is what I'm saying is, it's like I think no matter what, there's always like, and this is really I'm trying to speak to the 10 years younger version of myself of like, and the other people listening. It's like you're never ever going to give yourself credit that you actually did something. Like you're always going to look at yourself like, well, yeah, that's what I had to do, but like that doesn't set me aside from anybody else. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's always going to be this feeling inside of you that it's like, it feels no different than the person doing the 9 to 5. That's what was necessary. So
absolutely.
I don't deserve any praise or anything like that, or I'm not an outside the box thinker, but I think that's like you start to mentally deal with that just throughout your career.
Par for the course to do it that way, because that's
right.
If you're going to get that opportunity that so many other people want, you kind of have to be the guy that stands out as the squeaky wheel.
And I think that's what holds a lot of people back. I think a lot of people, because like I was very fortunate to have a lot of people kind of just give me a little nudge here and there.
Yeah.
And even today, like you still need a little nudge every now and again. And I think sometimes either people don't recognize the nudge or they
Mhm.
push back against the nudge because of their own insecurities, their own fear. And I
Yeah.
think you really, at a certain point, you have to be able to convince yourself that like you're going to be dead one day. So who gives a shit? Just
Exactly.
fucking do it.
It
You know, it's like,
it has taken me, and I'm still not
yeah,
past it, but
same.
I've gotten headway
Mhm.
on trying not to judge myself or
Yep.
critique myself, and just say, look, take this podcast for instance.
Mhm.
The lighting on my thing, and it's like I could say there's 100 reasons why I shouldn't or should wait,
Right.
but it's like,
Yeah.
look, I got to just do this. I've got the time, and
Right.
it's going to get better if I keep going, but I got to just go.
Yeah. And you got to start somewhere. Yeah. Yeah.
And another thing, I've met people who are similar to you and me in the sense like we've been talking about, and another factor on top of what you mentioned is not only do they consider this par for the course, but they also have whatever this personality trait is that doesn't allow them to see the good they've done or the progress they've made. They always
Mhm.
tend to feel like it's never good enough and they got to keep pushing.
Yep.
So it's almost this inherent nature of no matter what success they find, they still need to go to the next place and wait out front of the door for the guy to show up, even though they're successful and they've made a ton of progress
Right.
and created these amazing shows or something, and they're still,
Yeah.
scratching at the next door. It's like
Mhm.
natural to just keep doing that because, in reality, in the freelance world or however you want to describe it,
Mhm.
nobody's just saying, "Here's this amazing job. You want to have it?" Unless you're their
Right.
son,
Right.
It's the nepotism is that people get handed things, but if you're not
Mhm.
somebody's son, you got to be the first
Right.
guy there.
Yeah. You got to work. You got to work hard for it, and you got to figure out how am I going to make these things happen? How am I? And a lot of it's just like Sure, there's a lot of luck involved, timing, like
Yeah. Timing is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Like
timing is so huge that it's
my
almost
biggest
like you have to be.
To my two biggest breaks that have put me where I am today are all based on timing.
Yeah.
All based on timing.
Yeah.
And that to take, so internship is over. I'll get back to the story that kind of gets to that point. Internship is over.
Sure.
I started getting involved working as a grip. Shane kind of got me connected with this key grip. I started realizing
how fun it is to work at a rental house.
Yeah, worked on. Yeah, that's such a small rental house. Yeah. Panavision would be different. At least you'd learn something.
Where's that goddamn lens with the barcode on it? Damn it!
Yeah, exactly.
I can't find anything.
Yeah, it's chaos.
The barcode system doesn't work. Fix it.
Yeah,
I'm an intern. I don't know.
Fix it. So, and I learned a lot. I definitely got out of it what I was looking for. And it put me on a path that I was desperate to be a part of. And
what path was that?
Just getting on the filmmaking path of becoming a cinematographer. And so wanted to go the route of like, okay, well, I want to start at the bottom. I want to learn because I understand that learning all these other things are going to make me a stronger cinematographer. And I'm not ready to be a leader of a department and make creative decisions and walk into a room. Like I kind of equated it to the idea of like, well, if I want to be a cinematographer, I want to be as big as Shane or bigger. Why shoot smaller? Why sit here and go, well, I can't work for big directors like he works. I'm like, no, if I'm going to be a DP, I want to work with McG. I want Shane to turn to me and go, fucking Weldon, taking my jobs.
Exactly.
Like you got my directors. Like that's what I want. Like not in a malicious way, but I wanted to achieve what he was achieving and still is.
Shoot for as high as you can go. You never know how far you get, really.
Right. And I think the big part of that was it became very obvious, and because Shane took me under his wing and gave me a lot of great advice and was teaching me so much, and I realized like I don't know shit. And I'm like, I need to start at the bottom. And he was like, if you want to be a DP, he's like, you start working as a grip, be an electric, become a key grip, become a gaffer.
Even I think that's obvious to anybody that sees a DP work. You got to know You got to know your lights, your gels, your stands.
Yeah, you
You
have
can't not know that shit
right,
and expect someone to do it, and you don't know
right.
what to tell them.
And it never became more apparent to me how true that was until I did my first job in Europe, and I worked with an entirely Spanish crew in Spain, and
Wow.
just the experience that I had learned over the last few years of working in other departments and coming up, like, because there's obviously a language barrier, there's a difference between what they call things, but at least
Yeah.
there is a common thread that can get you to a place to communication. And if you just tried to like fumble around to be like, I'm just going to be a DP, because at a certain point too, like, one of the things that always bothered me, and it still bothers me, is I always wanted to be the DP that could name every single fixture and know exactly what they all do. And I'm constantly studying light output and learning what different lights do and trying to understand them. And a lot of it's just learning math, you're learning math
Well,
in a different way.
technology too is changing
Yeah.
so fast.
It is. Yeah. And the camera part has always come really easy to me. It's just my brain works that way really well. But I wanted to be a stronger lighting DP, and I never wanted to become the guy that just said, "Oh, just give me a big soft source or give me a big hard light." I never wanted to do that. But then I realized how I was putting too much pressure on that, because when I got to working overseas, it's too hard to walk in and say, I want this light, that light, this, it has to be these particular fixtures, because they don't have a lot of that. They have different brands. They have different, the rental house doesn't carry what you're used to using.
And so you may not be able to call for a specific
right
brand or style, but how to get there with whatever equipment.
Right. So then that's the way the conversation started to become, where I'd turn to my gaffer and I'd go, well, normally I would do it this way, and this is the kind of fixture I'm thinking of, but here's what I want to create. And they would go, okay, yeah, I know that light. Yeah, we don't have that. And they were like, but I could do it this way. I'd be like, all right, cool. And it's like, so you're finding that common
comes in,
exactly
on them to
like I did a
job specifically and let you move on.
Yeah. Every job I'm learning something different. I'm learning about a different light, especially when I'm overseas. And I didn't know that Mole Richardson they make a light called a mole beam, which is they make a tungsten version and an HMI version. I didn't know they made an HMI version at this size. I didn't know they made a 10K HMI mole beam until I did a spot for Rolls-Royce in Madrid. And this was the second time I was in Spain last year. And I was talking to my gaffer about using a light called a xenon, which is like a really hard focused beam of light. And I was trying to create these 3 big giant beams of light in a shot. And then he's like, I don't know if we have 3 of those in town. He's like, I know we have 1, maybe. He was like, well, what if I get a mole beam? And I'm like, oh, the mole beams are tungsten, right? He's like, no, we have the HMIs. And I was like, wait, hold on, time out. I'm like, I didn't know there was HMI mole beams. And granted, there's so many lights out there. You're constantly learning. And I think
when
you eventually
shoot outside off reservation, so to speak, in these sort of uncharted territories, do you get just a completely random sort of choices for equipment, lighting and everything?
Not random.
Is it standard?
It's pretty standard, but like whether it's a set of airy lights or they're Desisti or they're a mole, it's just sometimes it's a different brand.
I'm not sending you out there to tech scout. You get there and then you get it all done. So you kind of.
Well, no, I'll go out there. No, I usually at every job I tech scout when I go overseas too.
So you'll do a trip out there, tech, come back.
Yep. I'm usually there for a
period of time until you go back and shoot.
Well, no, it's usually like if the job's like a 3-day shoot, it's like you're out there for 2 weeks. And you're there because a lot of it's adjusting to the time difference. And then, then constantly there's the director will change their mind or they're figuring out the creative, and you're constantly I spend all my time in these foreign countries sitting in my hotel room it's like I'm waiting for a fax to arrive. It's like I wait for emails to show up with like new creative ideas, and I'm like, okay. And then I get on my computer and I'm like looking up different just ideas and functionality. Like for example, so I did a music video that was sponsored by Fiat for an artist named Ava Max, and we shot in Milan, Italy. So we're on the Scout, or on my way over, I get the creative, and I'm talking to the director, is Joseph Kahn, and Joseph's telling me, he's like, hey, we're going to do this kind of stuff, and we're going to do some underwater too. He's like, so we're shooting a pool and all that. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, he's like, think about what kind of lights you want to use to shoot a pool. I was like, yeah. And I'm like, that's easy, you know. I'm like, shooting a pool is not that hard. It's only, especially for what he was trying to go for. A lot of it was just, you know, some big lights over top, just lighting up the pool and just creating shafts of light, stuff like that. I was like, okay, no problem. And shafts of light. So we're scouting the stage, and the production manager turns to me and he goes, we're not doing the underwater anymore. Be a way to cut it from the budget. And I go, oh, okay. And Joseph turns around and goes, yes, we are. And they look at each other, look at me, and and we're all just kind of look at each other. And he goes, well, you're going to have to figure out how to do it without water. And I was like,
that's the best. If you want your underwater shot, do it.
So I didn't.
Water. So the guy's basically saying, no, you're not doing your underwater shot.
Oh, we did it without
I like
water.
that response though. Like for like from an AD type of world, you know, it's like
we did it
doing underwater. The DP says, yes, we are. Says, oh, okay, you are? Cool. Just do it without water.
Well, we did it.
Like
we did it without water.
In a very classy way. Oh yeah, great, good. It's just a response.
It was what was funny about it was less of like, no, you're not going to do it, and more of like he didn't realize that Joseph wanted to do it.
This is a water tank on a stage, or what was it?
Well, we hadn't even we were supposed to be scouting a water tank, and then we didn't. And so they tend to be this like, we want to do this water effect on the stage instead. Mm-hmm. And so I spent 3 days of essentially sleepless nights in a hotel room. I was staying up till 8 o'clock in the morning every day. I had a normal sleep schedule to, I had a list because I had 4 days to figure out what I was going to do. I had 4 days to figure it all out of how to do the shoot. Mind you, this is a music video that's like, just like $1 million at least, you know, so this is a big project, you know.
They want it to look good.
They want it to look good. It's Fiat, you know, they're not fucking around. So,
and what was the artist?
Ava Max is her name. She's like a rising pop star. She hasn't exploded, but she's getting there. So I spent 4 days just like drawing things, scrapping ideas, looking at references, researching, and I always make a list of all the things that I need to figure out, and I order them based on difficulty. And the very last one was the underwater thing, and the other stuff was like boom, boom, boom. Okay, I got the plan for that. Got that. Drawing out maps, and you know, granted, everybody spoke Italian. I'm speaking English. English is not very good for them, and so I'm making good sketches in Photoshop so that I have something
to communicate your lighting diagram?
Yeah, exactly. So that they can, and showing them a little bit of where the camera will go and stuff like that, and just trying to give them an idea. So it's not just, you know, what do you, and then because I can't show up on the day and go, do this, this, and this. They're like, well, you could have told me that yesterday. You know, like we at least planned it.
You're handing this lighting diagram off for a pre-rig or something.
Pre-rig.
Be there.
Well, not so they can't be there, but it's just so that they're not, so the teams don't show up without knowing what's going on. You know, like you can't come to set and go, okay, boss, what are we doing?
Start working it out.
Yeah. You gotta
let him get his head wrapped around it.
Right. You show up, your gaffer and you meet up after breakfast, and then he goes, okay, my guys are running the cable up the stairs.
Is your Italian gaffer and best boy or whatever.
Yeah. And my gaffer was old enough to be my dad. So that was interesting. Yeah. He was 61.
This is the guy you said was having a little trouble taking, you know, orders from you because you're younger.
Yeah, he definitely did. We ended up having a small conversation that did not, I do not personally like to scream and yell and get angry with people, even though you've seen me do it. And I continually try to work on that because I don't want to be spoken to like that. And I don't think it's productive. And there was definitely a moment after the first day where I was like, this guy clearly, because it was also, sometimes working with Joseph can be difficult for the crew because
I think any department head, though, if you don't know how this business works, even on a small shoot, it's may not be right, but it's not surprising to have department heads lose their shit because things change, budgets change, people come and go. It's this equipment and something broke and this isn't, and it's too late in the location. You're trying to create, you're not just laying bricks. It's just, you're trying to make things happen in this magical world of timing. And
in a world like this too, where like I was starting to say was, you know, the director, Joseph Kahn, like Joseph can be difficult with crews sometimes because things will change on the fly, which I know and I'm ready for, but it's hard if it's not your everyday crew for them to be ready for it. So they would turn to me and be like, this guy keeps changing his mind, David. Like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, God, and you have to be like, guys, we're going to be ready to pivot. It's okay. And it's just because you have to remember in places like Italy and other countries, it's not how they work. They go, it's here's what it is on paper and you stick to that plan.
Yeah.
Americans don't do that. And so that's less of about Joseph, and it's more about that's just the way Americans work, and we feel the moment. We feel, there's many directors that will edit while they shoot. That's something that Joseph does.
It's going to come together.
Yeah.
It's just a plan for now.
Right. It's a plan to get you started, but the plan always changes. And we had a small conversation where I basically went to him and I embellished a little bit that this was like my first opportunity for a big shoot because he didn't know the fuck I was. And,
you're just trying to reason with the guy and get him to feel for you a little bit.
Right.
So you can level off.
Yeah. And he kind of was like, okay. He finally came around, and because he and the crew kept hiding. They all of a sudden they'd just be gone. And I'd be like, where are these guys at? And then okay. And I looked at him, I said, look, at the end of the day, I said, I know, I was like, I know what you guys are doing. I was like, and I get it. I said, but here's the problem.
Yeah.
I said, in most cases, when the crew does this, everybody kind of looks around and they're like, okay, maybe we should slow down. Like, that guy over there, the director guy, he didn't give a fuck. So what's going to happen is he's going to turn to me and go, you don't know how to run a crew. You don't know how to get people to work hard and convince them that what I say goes. And Joseph,
that's his form of motivation.
Right. And Joseph he wasn't beating anybody up. He wasn't talking down anybody. He wasn't being rude, wasn't being offensive. It's a go mentality. And a lot of foreign
But it wasn't
crew,
like that in Italy.
Right. Italians,
they don't think that way, right?
They don't work that way. They just don't.
Yeah.
And that more power to them.
Like, have you seen those? There's a handful of behind the scenes footage of Kubrick working with crews in like the UK and these places.
Yep.
And it's like the middle of a shot, and these fucking guys go, we're gonna go have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
He's like, what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah.
Everything's ready to go. You guys are walking away to have tea.
Yep.
It's like it's incomprehensible. And I get that, but it's like just when another country with another, what's the word I'm thinking of?
This is another mentality.
Another mentality.
Well, I think a big part of that too is I think what a lot of people fail to realize, the people that are above the line, so to speak, and I think cinematographers, since we're not technically above the line, we're right at the line.
Yeah.
The crew is there to execute. It's not always their passion. It's not always it's a job. It's a paycheck. Yeah. And I think you have to level with that at least a certain point where you have to, you as a director and as a cinematographer, you have to get those people to buy in. You have to get them to buy into you. It's not about buying into the project. It's about, your production designer, your gaffer, your sound recorder, everybody going, I want to work hard because I know these people are going to take us places, and these guys want to work hard and they do a great job and they treat me with respect, and I like working with them. Like that's up to you to create that environment. Nobody else is going to do that, And I think that's
not very common that I've seen.
No, it's not. And I think that's something I've really learned from being on set, being treated poorly, and realizing by talking with other cinematographers, especially some of the more successful ones that are doing a lot of bigger projects that get their crews to be with them for 30 years. And they're like, it's a family. And they're like, family doesn't stick around if you treat them like shit. So
exactly.
Yeah.
When I read articles about so-and-so director, and their same DP and their same designer and their same, and movie after movie, I romanticize about that because it's like the thought of not only doing something you love, but forming a relationship with these people that hopefully is good, and finishing something and having it turn out well, and then turning around and getting another opportunity to do it again. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that,
It doesn't. Yeah. It's like I've been watching that
Um,
director's series on YouTube. I forget what the
Sure.
YouTube channel is, but I was watching the one about how Christopher Nolan got his career started and how he and Wally Pfister teamed up, and it was
Yeah. Did they team
like
up on Memento?
they teamed up on Memento, and you think
Yeah.
like Wally won an Academy Award for filming with Christopher, and that they worked together for the next 15 years, and then when Wally decided to start directing, Christopher executive produced his first movie, and it's like, and you think, and then when watching this little piece about how Christopher got started, it was like he spent $6,000 to shoot his very first film, his first feature film called The Following.
Following. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it became Memento was the next one a number of years later, which is it's crazy to think that he went from a $6,000 feature film to a $4 million feature film, and clearly his talent
You
showed.
could, when I read about The Following, or I shouldn't say really read as much as it is
Mhm.
watching videos about it.
Yeah.
He put in a shit ton of effort into The Following after it was done and cut.
Yeah.
He took that around and around and around.
Mm-hmm.
And
he
I
shopped it like
forget
crazy.
what it was, but he got some sort of distribution deal for it.
He got a distribution deal because he was willing to go back and change his final edit too. He went back and made changes that
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah. Like I guess the studio wanted, it was a smaller studio. They wanted some things changed, and he was willing to work with them, and it wasn't
Which is
necessarily
probably
anything that,
smart at that point in his career.
Yeah,
It's like, look,
yeah.
if I
Right.
take their advice and change my view a
Mhm.
little, that may not be what I want, but it's for the greater good at this point.
Right. And then ultimately ended up giving him, it's crazy to think that when he did Memento, he had complete control of the final edit. And I'm like,
His first
your
studio
first
job,
studio
I guess?
film. Yeah, his first studio
I mean,
film. It's like,
Jesus.
are you kidding? And
Albeit
it's
an independent type of thing, but still.
right. And it won a couple Oscars.
And all he had to show for before that was Following and that student film that it was like the person who was like shrunken.
Yeah, he had
That's
that one. Yeah, that was it. And then commercials and music videos.
And to get Memento and get creative final
Mhm.
cut on it. That's pretty.
Yeah.
But you can see when you watch, what is it? Following.
Mhm.
I feel like that concept alone of following someone is cinematically interesting right
Mhm.
away.
Yeah.
Even before you hear a log line or read a page of a script.
Right.
Just following someone and that, what you might garner from their life, just because it's weird to think that you could literally just follow someone around.
Right.
So that's an interesting concept cinematically.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you about being a cinematographer
Mhm.
and being a department head and being at your age. And if you have like interesting stories or just kind of an opinion on it, you could be at any age in a lot of these jobs and these positions on set and so forth, but
Mhm.
a department head, it's different. And you mentioned a minute ago about talking to people out at,
Right.
in another country and dealing with people that are older. But in this country, you have any interesting sort of like positions or things you talk about, that hurdles you had to get over?
Yeah, there's definitely different stuff. Like I think when you go overseas, when a director brings you to a foreign market, it's automatically assumed that you're Chivo. Basically, that's what the producers look at you as. I prefer to work in Europe than I do in the United States because
meaning like when you step into the meeting, that territory.
Yeah, because
there's no stigma.
Right, there's no stigma. They don't know who you are. They don't want to insult you. There's a lot of that going on. It's a lot easier to get things done. A lot easier to push beyond. Like I did a Rolls-Royce job where, we start going. It was kind of a crazy job. I got booked on it last minute. I get over there, and so we scout, and the producers look at me and they're like, and this is just like I'm on the director's scout, and they go to me, can you give us your lighting package today? Or tonight? It's like 11 o'clock at night. I've been up for 28 hours. And I'm like, no. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I gotta get with my gaffer and the best boy, and I gotta go over with them. I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck is available here. Like, we just give us a rough idea. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. I'm going to bed. So yeah,
You don't
if that
wanna
had,
bury yourself.
yeah, I don't want to bury myself because they had poor information. The interesting thing about shooting overseas is that you get a little more, I don't know if I'd call it respect, but I guess it's the easiest way to say it. And you get a little more control because they don't know what to expect when you go out. They don't know who you are. They don't know what your background is. They don't really know what you've done. If they've hired this director to do this job and the director wants you, then you must be good. That's the assumption that's
Interesting.
made. So I did this
And
job.
by saying that, then you're saying that there's a lack of respect to a younger department head in this country. Is that fair to say?
I think it's just, I think in some ways in the United States, it's just producers just don't give a shit. It's about their
Huh.
bottom line. They don't care.
Right.
And I say that even with, I think it's to a certain point of it because the letters ASC for being a part of the American Society of Cinematographers carry so much weight in the United States that if you don't have those three little letters after your name, because if you're an ASC cinematographer, it would be, David C. Weldon Jr., ASC,
Yeah.
Shane Hurlbut, ASC, that's how you be listed on the call sheet. And it's very important. It's a bad
You may as
thing.
well say David C. Weldon Jr., really good cinematographer that can be
Yeah.
trusted.
It's like being put like doctor in front of your name.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, okay.
you've earned that. Like someone has recognized you, even though, kind of thing. And overseas,
Gets rid of at least half the producers that don't trust you.
yeah, exactly. And it's the kind of thing of where every producer you work with, until you get to know them, they question every single light that you have in your work. Do you need this light? Do you need that? Do you need that stand?
But what would you attribute
like,
that to? Is it because it's so expensive?
because
for you
they've
to do
because
your job, or?
because they've worked with other cinematographers that have done things differently, and
Okay.
they don't know what you're trying to achieve because they're not a creative. They are the bean counters. And bean counters do one thing and do one thing well. They count beans. And so when you show up and you're being creative the way that you do it, well, I just worked last week with a guy with the letters A something C, and he didn't have nearly half this shit on his list, or he did,
bullshit
but
you and just say that.
yeah, and they bullshit you and say that just to get you to go, oh, okay, I'll go ahead and I'll scale it down.
Maybe you'll cower in their shadow and
right, because they don't.
dominate you.
Because at the end of the day, if you can't stand up for yourself as a DP and fight for what you know that you need on a job, and the job looks bad,
It's your fucking fault.
it's your fault that you gave into that producer.
Yeah.
It's not their fault that they pressured you to give in. That's like what I was saying was the Rolls Royce job. My lighting budget, I spent triple what they budgeted. And then on the final day, they were fighting me the day before, and I just went, it got to the point where it's like midnight and they're arguing with me about it. And I go, look, this is what it's going to take. I didn't sell this creative to you guys and I didn't accept it. He sold it to you and you accepted it. Not my responsibility to figure out how to pay for it. I'm literally, and I walked away.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And we did it.
I think that I'm not a department head, but
yeah. And
I have these moments in my line of work where I'm asked to give people answers to things that are it's of no significance to them what the outcome is. All they want is it to fit in their box.
Right.
And they may want the amount of time it takes to fit in their box. They may want the amount of people you need to fit in their box. But they don't give a fuck about what you see on screen. None of that's important. That's your problem. So the inverse of that is like what you just said. You're like, look, if it looks like shit, I'm fucked. So I'm not going to fuck myself and make you happy. You fuck yourself and make me happy, or we can meet in the middle.
Right.
But I agree with you. And I think that's something that takes time to learn. And not everybody gets that right out of the gate.
But you can still
need to stand up for yourself to some degree and not just agree to what people say right away and be yes, because you'll just put yourself in a position where you can't succeed because you tried to appease somebody who just wants to appease the next person and so on.
And I definitely have gotten stronger at that as time's gone on, but you can still get fucked because, so I did a job in February, can't remember. was like it was like my last real job in 2020.
Last job of 2020
Yeah.
in March.
Yeah. No, it was like end of January. So I did a Pepsi commercial, a series of Pepsi commercials, and the creative was doing a lot of like DJ lights, like high end, like big light fixtures, like using them robotically. They'd move and do stuff. And the director just kept pushing. The producer keeps in my ear going, "We can't afford that. We can't afford it." I'm like, well, it's your fucking job to tell him that you can't afford the creative he wants. It's not my
this
job.
Picture
to do
that you guys signed off on in this deck?
Yeah. That's that, guys. It literally got to the 11th hour where we're calling the rental house and canceling lights because they finally had the conversation, and I was furious because I've talked to other mentors and other cinematographers that mentor me, and they're like, yeah, just get used to that. They're like, that just happens. They're like, but you're gonna have to learn how to balance the apology when you call the rental house and say, I'm so sorry that happened.
Somebody get
burned
because the lights are sitting on the dock.
Right, it's sitting on the dock. Somebody had to work on putting all that shit there instead of working on something that was going out and making money.
Earning money now because they thought you were taking them, and now you're not.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's like stuff like that. Like even if and it depends on. I think it's really important as a DP to build relationships with producers. Like I've definitely had some producers that right away we hit it off and we're good buddies and we're friends and we don't always work together, but we're still pals and we hang out and stuff. And I've had other producers that we started off a little rough, eventually smoothed it out. And it's usually producers that have some serious years under them that you don't link up with right away, because they look at you like, well, you're just some young kid and I've done this a bunch. And I think if you just stay true to who you are and you understand that eventually that person can become your ally because you have to show them that you're going to become their ally. Like one producer in particular, like he hit me up a couple weeks ago and was like, hey, do you have one of those Ronin S stabilizer things? I was like, yeah, I do. You want to borrow it? He's like, I'd love to. And he borrowed it for like a month just because he's right now with the coronavirus world we live in. I'm going to start trying to shoot some documentary stuff just in case if I got to find a way to make some money and I just want to learn and shoot because he has a Sony DSLR. It's like, he was very grateful that I was willing to loan the gear for him. And I was like, and in my mind, I'm going like, that's a good thing that he's calling me.
Yeah.
He hit me
up. Sitting in your storage or it's helping you maintain a relationship.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a sort of a
And this is a guy that
way to put it, but
this is a guy that we had a bumpy start.
Yeah.
And over time got to know each other, smoothed it out, and have become allies in working together. And
what's funny? A lot of the time, the ones that I clash with but get along with later, it's almost like you get rid of that bullshit quicker.
Yeah.
Get it out of the way.
Yeah,
and realize that you can get along rather than it never getting out of the way and having some degree of tension forever.
Yeah, and I have that with a few producers where I'm like, I just wish we could just get the shit out. Like let's
just fight real quick.
Yeah.
Like, can we just duke it out, get this shit off, and then be friends?
Yeah, then be friends. It's like we're like quasi friends, but like we could really be, and it's just sometimes it just takes a little longer. And I think, as much as this job is a creative, outlet and a creative endeavor, there is a business aspect to it that not everyone you work with is a creative, so to speak. Yeah. And you have to remember that. You have to be cognizant of understanding where these people are coming from. And
have you had those producers that can understand where you're coming from, and it ends up being a great job because you tell them I need $50,000 and they say, okay, I get it.
I have. I think even to that respect of those producers for the job, for the Rolls-Royce job of, oh my God, David, you're tripled the budget in a 30-minute. I spent 30 minutes explaining to the producer, look, I'll walk you through everything I'm doing. Okay, I need to be walked through. Okay, let's sit down. And it wasn't a tense, angry conversation at all. And at the end of it, she's like, you really need more, don't you? and I'm like, yeah, good. And it's like, but you have to come into it with this, you can't come into it with this attitude of like, you're trying to take away what I'm doing. You have to come in with this attitude of going, all right, I know that you have to justify this in your line items, and you probably have some wiggle room. This is only going to make you see what I see and go, fuck yeah, David needs all that. Okay. God damn it. She literally just looked at me and she was like, fuck.
Yeah.
But then in the same breath, she's like, but this is going to look cool, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to look pretty badass. I was like, client's going to be really happy.
Yeah.
But it was because I had the tools that I needed. We didn't have the manpower.
I would think
was
for
part of
you
the
that it's really helpful to have a producer that has some ability to see creative and see what this thing's going to look like, and
yeah.
not just be completely buried in their email and their budget.
Yeah. And sometimes people have said to me, they're like, oh, was it helpful when you work with producers that have done other jobs? Like they've been an art director, they were a grip. And I'm like, sometimes. I'm like, it depends. It's all personality. Sometimes I've worked with people that are like, oh, well, I used to be a grip and this is how we would do it. And I'm like, you were a grip 25 years ago. Like, don't like,
that's too far gone.
Yeah. Like you can't all of a sudden just start telling these guys how to do shit. It's like, that's not fair to them. That's not fair to their intelligence.
You can't just bust out with I was an animator for Disney.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't fucking matter anymore.
It doesn't matter anymore. It's like, you're the producer. I'm not. That's like if I were trying to say to these people, well, I was a producer for the Pittsburgh Penguins and I produced TV shows, but it's not the same thing.
You should
it's
just
not the same.
That, though. If they hit you with I shot many things back, and you go, oh really? Well, I used to produce sports, so you shouldn't have to do this because I know what producing is.
Right.
And just totally hit them with exactly what they hit you with, and go. So there we stand now. Can we get back to the?
I just usually, if I'm hit that hard by somebody, I just look at them and say, I don't give a shit what you used to do. This is what we're doing, And it's
I think what you said a minute ago, though, is probably the most applicable thing. Is that if you just level with somebody, I think. What did I see the other day? It's not the same topic, but one of these riot police. The riot police are all stacked up, and they're facing the protesters. And the riot police have the shields and the batons and all the armor.
Right.
And for one reason or another, one of the riot police gives a hug to this guy that's like leading the pack, the guy that's like with his fists in the air, and he's got some paperwork and he's telling these people the megaphone. The riot guy hugs the riot leader.
Yeah.
And aside from what might have been said, it's like you totally don't see that coming. And it probably brought it did. You could tell from the body language of the rioter, it brings this guy's tension and anger level down faster than it could ever been done verbally at all. So if a producer comes to you and says, look, I get what you have to do, or you talk to a producer and say, I know where you're coming from and I know that you have to answer to so-and-so, but if I go less than this, we're going to miss out on XYZ and we all look bad. And if you have that humanistic approach and you don't fight them, I would say probably 9 out of 10 times you get a better response than if you said, look, don't tell me to do my job or any of that kind of attitude. That's what I did a job in.
This probably wasn't my last job. The Pepsi job was on my last job. I did a job for Ford right after the Pepsi job. I think it was like 2 weeks later, and it was a new production company, new director. We all hit it off. Everybody was great. And I'll never forget, the producer called me. I'm out of town on one job. This is back when things were good, like first quarter of 2020. I'm
West.
Yeah,
I'm back in the Wild West before the nuclear holocaust.
Yeah. So
the world went away.
I'm on the phone with the producer and she's telling me, she's giving me numbers and this, that, or telling me some of the numbers. And I said, look, okay. And she sends me the creative. And I said, she's very concerned, because she's looked at all my work and she's like, your work is like, the level of what you're doing is way bigger than what this job needs to be. And I said, I understand. And I said, look, I'm going to go at the pace that you want me to go and the director wants me to go. So when we get together, we'll have that conversation and we'll go from there. And she's like, okay. So
you shot on an iPhone.
Shot on an iPhone. No.
So you shot on an iPhone.
No, so
take it down a notch.
Take it way down. So director shows up and basically, says to me, he's like, says to the crew, like, look, guys, this is a money job. It's like, these are local spots being done for Ford on a high end level, but it's not the national stuff. So we want it to look great. but like, let's not go crazy. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I kept asking, I said, what's my lighting budget? What's this budget? Do I have to play for this? And I said, all right, I said, here's how I'm going to plan for it. I said, I'm going to build it out the way I would build it out if no money was no problem. And then you're going to tell me, David, you can't have a condor with a big fly swatter in it, which is when you take the big lift and you put a big rag in it, the diffusion rag, and you bring it over the top of something to diffuse it or whatever, soften everything out. And so we scout the first location. I'm like, my key group, like, Tony, condor's going to go there, 20 by 20, this and that, 18K over there, 18K. Da, da, da. And the production manager's like, oh my God, like freaking out. So producer calls me over a couple minutes later and she's like, we do not have money for condor. And I said, okay. I looked at her without like skipping a beat. I went, okay, we'll get rid of the condor. She was like, but we really? And I'm like, yeah, we'll do it different. I said, we'll do it. I was like, we'll do it a different way. I said, let me talk to Diego, the director. And
so your method was to shoot the moon and let them scale you back rather than scale yourself back?
Exactly. Because I feel like when you scale yourself down and then when you get to a point where you're like, fuck, I need to come up because I'm not able to do anything. You can't come up. You can always come down.
Especially if yesterday you emailed them a budget.
Yeah.
And the next day you want to up it. It's like, whoa.
And so at the end of the
send it to somebody else.
At the end of the shoot,
go back now.
Yeah. And the producer said to me, she was like, at the end of the shoot, she's like, you gave me a heart attack at that first location on the scout. She's like, but you weren't kidding that she's like, you came in under budget and everything. I'm like, well, yeah, I get what this job is. I'm like, you can, and that's what people are like, well, you shouldn't compromise. It's a money job. I'm like, yeah, I could have put that fly swatter in, but if I do it with stands and I roll it up and I go, okay, I need to be physically in with the camera or this kind of lens so that I don't see the stands on either side, because we're not going to do any visual effects and paint those stands out. As long as myself and the director understand that and we commit to that, then I save a bunch of money by not having to put the condor in on the street, and it's just making decisions like that and being smart. But if you've got a director that you work with that isn't going to lock themselves into that, don't do it. It's like, that's the hardest.
Back to that thing of knowing who you're working with and going
exactly
to the job and understanding each other.
It's like when I work with Joseph Kahn, I don't compromise anything unless I can have a talk with him and the producer, because the producer's turning to me and going, we can't afford that. And that even happened on the Pepsi job. He directed that one and the producer keeps saying, we can't afford that. And I'm like, I can't do this job without that. That's what we've gotten to. Like, and it got to the point where I'm like, he has left the scout. He has left the pre-light. At this point, there's no turning back. He's not changing his creative because he's already moving on to working under the next job, pre-production at his home with the other producer. You're not going to get a director to dial back and all of a sudden blow everything up in less than 24 hours and start all over. No, he's committed. And that's not fair to do that to a director. You should have already gotten to that director a week ahead of time and said, we need to alter some things, and here's why.
So many moving parts to
there's
things
it's not right. And then because it only makes that director look bad to the agency, because at the end of the day, the agency is going to look at that director and go, they're not thinking about how much money is being spent. They're thinking about how amazing this is looking for their client. And if it's not turning out amazing, who do they point the finger at? They point the finger at the director, because the director is at the top. So
I think that's probably the top three, maybe the actual top. Go to budget move. People I talk to is just finding a way to safely inflate the budget to still get where you need, because that there's going to be a lot of things that a lot of people in the pipeline and a lot of reasons to take your budget down. They're going to ask you to come down because of this and because of this.
Right.
And if you shoot the moon, you still get halfway there, kind of thinking, or whatever.
Right.
Whatever analogy you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
A decorator that I really like, she had some really cool creative ways to cover her ass for what would be unforeseen things, but she knows that these are the things that happen on every job.
Right.
And it might be a thing that's a consistent TV thing that she always puts a line in for
Mhm.
L&D or something like that, and makes that bigger. Because if it doesn't, if nothing gets damaged or lost, and that L&D doesn't get touched, well, then that's cool. She can rent more shit and just, use that L&D part of, so
Right.
it's a chess game or something, something like that, where you're
It's
as
a
a
chess.
department head,
It's a chess game that you just build off of experience. It just takes time. You learn the tools that you like to use on a consistent basis. You know where you can cut things. You know that you can get away with doing this particular type of shoot with this size of a crew, or because the crew's always going to come in and ask for more because, well, what if things change? Of course, if things change, and you're going to try. Everybody's going to try to make sure that they're not getting peeled, so to speak, to where they can't deliver. And so, you eventually you come up with shorthand. You find ways, just like the example you gave. You find shorthand that works for you.
Yeah.
You know.
So there you are doing commercials now with your experience level where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself? Like, if you were to talk to, I don't know. Like, I guess I want to ask, where do you want to go from here? Is really
I think I definitely want to get into a narrative space, shooting features and shooting, or shooting television shows or both.
Yeah.
I'd still would enjoy to continue to do commercials and even music videos from time to time, because there's a little more flexibility, a little more creative control sometimes, or a little less control, giving you more creative freedom on some of those spaces. Because I think early, and from what I've learned and talking with different people, it really depends on who you're connected to and who you're working with, who the producers are, who the directors that you're working with. If you already have a pre-established relationship of, what you're capable of pulling off and doing on a movie or a television show, versus, someone coming in and saying, well, we need it to look like this. And you still have your stamp, but you're more or less executing something that's already built. Sometimes, and it's not always the case, but obviously if you're coming into season 3 of a show that already has an established look, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. You can't do a whole lot sometimes. And that's not a bad thing. And I think that's a part of the industry. You have to build that relationship. You build your portfolio, and opportunities come from different places, so I'm not afraid of, I don't care. Like I'm supposed to be doing a movie this summer. It's been pushed again. We just pushed it another month to September. It's not a huge budget movie, but it's like somewhere in the $1 million range, which is healthy. It would be my first feature as the DP and not shooting second unit. And it's an opportunity. To me, that's an experimentation. It's both myself and the director are looking to make that jump, and maybe we can make that jump together, or maybe it's just an opportunity for both of us, but maybe we don't continue to work together. That's fine. And we'll see where it goes. But I think you have to take, if you want to do features, eventually you're going to have to try to do a feature. And the opportunity is going to come from a place that doesn't make sense sometimes. This opportunity is really coming because of a first AD that I'm very good friends with. I have gotten to know this writer who is also going to be the lead actor, and he's one of the executive producers. I got to know his wife, who is a good friend of mine and is a very good friend of my girlfriend. And I got to know him like just by going to parties, like barbecues, essentially, not like going to the club, but just like going, my first AD friend would, come over for the Super Bowl or come over for the fight, just socializing. And I've known them for like 3 years. And all of a sudden it was at the Super Bowl this year in 2020. And he comes over to me and he's like, hey, I got this script. And that's how it always starts. I got this script. Classic. And I was like, sure. He's like, I want to know if you'd be. He was like, yeah. I was like, okay. He's like, I used to shoot video for the Penguins, man. Are you kidding me? Yeah, exactly. And and he just kind of was like, take a look and let me know what you think. And
did you actually? I mean, honestly, like it's something.
Yeah, it's It's not a bad script. They've done a few more revisions. They have a latest revision to send to me. It was pretty long at the beginning. It was like 130 pages, and it was a lot of detail. And I was like, well, this is great detail on paper, but like I'm like visually, if we're capturing that, like, and so I think they've truncated a lot of it. They made it a little simpler. They've asked for some of my notes, but I was like, I really don't want to give you my notes until I have your final version. And I knew they were cutting 25 pages out. So they're sending me the latest version now. And then we'll,
do you look for, in a moment now, like in your life as of right now, what you're doing with your life, with your career, I should say, and where you want to go, when you see a feature opportunity, is there something specific that you're looking for in there to do that you can achieve or show a skill or anything like that?
I'm trying to look, I think it's less about trying to showcase myself, and it's more about I'm looking for a script that respects the audience. And what I mean by that is I look for a script that doesn't just spoon feed everything to the audience and doesn't have to physically show you everything like a mid 2000s TV show or some random drama on Netflix that had a low budget or has a following for teenagers. I think that's what I really look for. And those are that's always my notes when I look at a script is, well, do we have to show this moment? What if we allude to it in this way so that you kind of leave the audience guessing, but maybe 15 to 20 pages later, something takes place or this takes place, and then we tweak it that way. And then that allows them to go, oh my God, that's what happened 20 minutes ago. And then it goes click, like at a certain point, that's
you're trying to, from a cinematographer's point of view, try to help develop
because I think
to be something visually, telling a story visually rather than,
because I think the only way,
because
I think the only way you can make a visually interesting story as a cinematographer is it has to have good direction and it has to have good screenwriting. And if it doesn't have those things, what you do doesn't matter. You could put a bunch of cool shots and a one take and all this stuff, but who cares?
Flat too.
Exactly.
You don't want to be the guy that just worked on it for
right. Like
I just watched on Netflix. I'm not trying to call any specific movie out.
Sure.
But these like movies that otherwise would have been like a direct to DVD, like the SEAL Team 10 or just like nobody that
Yeah.
It's just the one sheet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's so obvious that it's like B action.
Right.
And these things start out with a shot of two people talking for like 3 minutes with minimal back and forth cutting.
Right.
And I'm like, this is SEAL Team movie, and the first 3 pages are talking with like very little cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a woman talking to a guy about you're just like,
right. Yeah. I think that's
man, like this is I don't know who these characters are. This is not action filled. I signed up for action. When you said the word SEAL Team, you set my expectations.
Right.
I don't know who they're fucking talking about. I don't know any of the characters, so you haven't told me any information yet. It's 3 pages of talking about shit that I have no idea what you're talking about. And it's just a failure of filmmaking and storytelling at that point. I always wonder though, like, for a DP or for anybody, when you see a script, because I agree with you that the feature is kind of the crown jewel. It's like you want to leave something behind that you can say you made that people enjoyed, and it told a story and brought someone into another world or however they enjoyed it.
And TV can become that too. I think it just depends on who that very much has changed in the last 5 to 6 years. Yeah. It didn't always used to be that way. It was, when we used to talk about TV.
I think it did, but it was different. There's shows from the 80s and 90s and stuff that I love,
it's true.
But I don't love them the way that I love like True Detective.
Mm-hmm.
True Detective is an 8-hour movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the A-Team is just a fun half-hour show.
Right.
And I love it because I was a certain age, or But,
right. I use CSI, like Law and Order, as my example of like, I wouldn't be upset if I got an opportunity to shoot some episodes of those shows, but I'm also not going to be that excited because there is a formula that you
Sure.
have to make when you walk into a show like that.
Yeah.
And but there are some shows, there's some shows on Sci-Fi and some other networks that have a formula, but they bring in a different director and a different DP. Sometimes they give them a little freedom. It depends on what the showrunners, especially for television, a showrunner
I've
that
worked
runs
on
the show,
TV and I've
what they want to
seen
do.
the director they hired, and I hate to do that, but
Yeah.
I don't understand sometimes what this person is there.
Yeah. Why are they even there? Yeah.
Because the showrunner leaning over their shoulder. Do you think maybe you could have them not stand so close? The director.
Yeah.
Oh, hey guys, can you guys just back up just a 1/2 step?
Right.
What the fuck is going?
I know.
But
I've seen that a
this
bunch of
guy's
times.
brainchild, and he brought it to Fox, and Fox greenlit it. It's him, and
Mhm.
he has to look over every little thing.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
from a creative standpoint, that's a tough one. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I guess it depends where you're at in your career. Like, do you want to sign up
Right.
and take a paycheck on this thing and do it and make contacts, and
Mhm.
also have someone whisper in your ear, or do you want to say no?
Right. Not everybody gets to be Sam Mendes and Christopher Nolan and Roger
Yeah.
Deakins and
There's only
Chivo.
like
and,
10 of those fucking guys.
yeah, that's what I think. I was
Everybody
like,
else has to work.
right. Yeah, we all strive for that. Sure. I think a lot of us do. And but at a certain point, you have to be realistic that if you are fortunate to get to that kind of
Yeah.
level where you have that kind of control, it's not going to happen overnight. So at a certain point, you have to start somewhere and start building relationships. And along the way, you're going to meet someone that thinks like you and says, you know what, dude, I got this amazing script and I think I can shoot it for $6,000. Will you do it?
Yeah.
That's how these things happen. They don't happen by a studio going, we're going to give you $15 million and you're going to shoot your first movie. And no, you guys are going to go
spark.
Yeah. You guys are going to go plant that seed together, and you're going to take all the people that you've built along the way. You helped that your gaffer get his new house and his new Tesla and this and that. And you're going to go, now I need the favor.
Just the basics.
Yeah. Just the basics. Just the
his
basics.
house in the Palisades and his Tesla.
Yeah.
That's all he needs. It's just these little things. I think that you could still make the following type of thing like that can still work today. It could still be something, the Robert Rodriguez story. Like you could still do that today, I think.
I think you can.
Everyone has a camera, but if you have something that is well made and you're showing the ability to be sort of a great filmmaker all around.
That's what I think made that movie that Nolan shot The Following so impressive was it was 16 millimeter film and essentially all natural light. There was no light. There were no diffusion rags. This is one other crazy stuff that we used to shape. It was run and gun, and it
made the script though. I mean, you couldn't just run and gun and have those dark spots on any particular story.
Right.
It really worked for following someone around and being creepy as fuck.
And he used, the opening sequence of the film is the only part of the film that isn't shot handheld. And the reason he wanted to reversed that, when he reversed engineered.
Kind of shaky, nervous,
it's shaky.
Right?
But he also did it on purpose because it was cheaper to do it all handheld because he's stealing the locations.
Oh, didn't he say that if you establish the tripod, you take people into your story from this professional feel of this control.
Right. That's why he did it.
Can go crazy.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they did it because he wanted to. He wanted people to see it if he was going to sell it and try to sell the studios that it wasn't just a student film or something.
Right.
It's like the fact that he had precision dolly moves to start the opening scene. It was like the most expensive part of the movie, and then the rest of it.
That money, then he just walk around. With
exactly. Yeah. And it worked, but it worked for the story. He totally reverse engineered the story to go, here are the tools that I know I have, and how do I make a film out of that and put it all together. Yeah,
and I think that's what people saw, and that's why people were willing to throw money at him because you could feel the skill there.
Yeah, big time.
Well, what else?
What else?
Talk about your haircut?
Not really. This was a mistake.
We call that the COVID cut. Anyway, screw you. I'm out. David C. Weldon Jr.
It's like, is that how you're gonna end
Social media. Yeah. Unless you have some big movie that you're promoting, I guess that's it.
No, not yet.
Low energy. See you later. All right. See you next time. Bye.